Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce our last, I think, speaker of the afternoon. He is not here. He is it actually in New Delhi? Are you actually in New Delhi?
New Zealand or Australia?
Australia. In a land far, far away. Well, we miss you. But let me introduce you to another friend of mine. He's a neurosurgeon, Andres Rubiano. He is a neurosurgeon in Bogota, Colombia. He is a professor of neurosciences and neurosurgery at El Bosque University in Bogota. He is the co-director of the Global Neurosurgery International Fellowship Program, which is a collaborative between Meditech Foundation, Cambridge University in the UK, and the Barrow Neurological Institute at Phoenix Children's Hospital. He is also chair of the Neurosurgical Surgery Service at Valle Salud, if I didn't screw that up too badly, Clinical Network in Cali, Colombia, and also is the chair of the International Committee of the ANS, CNS, Neurotrauma, and Critical Care Joint Section. So please join me in welcoming our last speaker of the day, Dr. Rubiano.
Hi, hello. Thank you for the kind introduction.
We're working on your slides here, Andre.
You should have
okay.
screen. You should be able to show your screen. Control.
Okay. Do you have my screen there?
Oh, we're getting there. Tell us what time it is for you, Andres.
It is now 9 a.m. on the 22nd. Do you have my screen now?
We're ready, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to the organizers. I'm going to briefly speak about the resource stratification integration into the clinical practice guideline development. We have a local exercise in Colombia called the BOOTStrap that have been considered an important process that maybe can be replicated through the World Federation of Neurosurgical Societies. The learning objectives will be to describe the concept of protocol stratification for neurotrauma care according to the different level of resources, and also to discuss the BOOTStrap project development, how that fills a gap into the knowledge transferability and applicability from evidence-based concepts to the real-world scenario. You have been discussing the whole day about the clinical practice guidelines. Also, we know there are documents that incorporate recommendations, mostly based on evidence, but also sometimes on expert consensus that looks for reduced heterogeneity in clinical practice. They are generally built over robust methodologies in order to select the best evidence. But we know that there are some limitations, especially because of the rigid recommendations that generally do not have all the content to fill specific gaps in the medical practice. So in order to fill these gaps, generally there need to be some sort of clinical practice recommendation that need to be built over expert consensus. And sometimes it requires to have protocol flowcharts or algorithms that can be applicable for the regular practice. So we'll know that the consensus generate recommendations for an agreement between professional experts in specific subjects generally are endorsed by scientific societies, and these consensus generally have broad participation from different stakeholders. Also, the protocols establish a series of procedural steps in order to agree rules for the clinical management of specific situations. The algorithms allows the indication of the decision-making flow for these protocols and can be included in other documents. I'm going to mention specifically into the neurotrauma field some of these examples. This is a consensus from the World Society of Emergency Surgery that look for filling the gap for how to manage a patient in the first 24 hours with TBI and polytrauma. Most of the guidelines address questions only for patients with isolated TBI. So the intent of this consensus was to fill this gap when you have a polytrauma patient. It's pretty focused on the initial bleeding control management and have an algorithm that was developed in order to support many of the medical practice. We have also recent consensus for a specific management guide over invasive monitoring systems. In this case, this is the CIVIC one for ICP monitoring. With some international groups, we have developed some sort of algorithms that has been placed in posters in order to support medical practice in ICUs. This is another example. This is the famous CREVICE protocol that is based for guiding TBI care only by CT and clinical exam. It has been very applicable in areas that does not have too many resources. We have another example of consensus in different topics. These are two of the main international consensus, one for decompressive craniectomy recommendations and the other one for cranioplasty after decompressive craniectomy. So, for example, what do we have until now? We have evidence-based, consensus-based guidelines from different countries, with different questions and in very different contexts. We have expert consensus for specific topics like craniectomy, cranioplasty. We have protocol for managing patients with CT and clinical examination, consensus for managing patients with polytrauma and TBI, consensus for managing patients in absence of neurosurgical services. That was the second exercise of the World Society of Emergency Surgery. We have algorithms developed by consensus for managing patients with ICP, and also algorithms developed by consensus for managing patients with ICP and PTIO2. So we have several tools that can be applicable in different contexts, but the point is, which one do you select for your daily practice? So sometimes you can select one of these if fits specifically into your level of training and also your level of resources. But we all know that the world don't works in that way. So one size does not fit all, especially due to the variability in human and technological resources. So that's mean that in daily practice, sometimes you can be in a center that have many resources, but for any reason, the CT can be broken. And there is no a second option for that CT. That's especially works in LMICs. So we need to have an exercise that can have several options on each category on intervention. That's why we developed this exercise of the BOOTStrap TBI. What we made was having people representative of each one of the different stages of care: pre-hospital care, emergency room, surgery, postoperative care. And we select people that practice in very different environments: pre-hospital care in environments with very low resources, pre-hospital care in environments with medium level of resources, pre-hospital care in environments that have all the resources, and also different levels of training: very basic training, advanced training, and the same stats for these other areas like emergency room, surgery, and postoperative care. And we bring all these people together to, based on their expertise, start building recommendations that can be applicable in all these different type of settings. This is a diagram that allows you to understand what is this exercise about. So in the first block, we have the pre-hospital area. And any patient can arrive to a pre-hospital team that does not have all the resources or does not have any level of training. This is the red block. Or the patient can arrive to a place that have an intermediate level of resources, some sort of resources for the ambulance and some level of training. Or the patient can arrive to a situation where they have all the resources and all the advanced training. This is the green box. So from that area, you can move either to an emergency room that have or an emergency room that didn't have CT. And even if you have CT, you can be in a center that have very low level of resources plus the CT, intermediate level of resources plus the CT, or advanced level of resources or training plus the CT. Or you can be in a center that does not have CT and also have low level of resources, intermediate level of resources, or advanced level of resources, even without CT. And then you move from a center that can have neurosurgery in place, or a center that can have general surgery in place or trauma surgery in place. And then you need to do something there if the patient does have the possibility to early transfer. Once you decide if your patient is going to be go under surgery by neurosurgeon or by other type of surgeon, then you can go for the postoperative care. And also this postoperative care can be in a very high range of circumstances. There are centers, for example, that do not have ICU. They have to they need to leave the patient in the operation room waiting for the transfer for any kind of situation. Or you can have a really high advanced ICU or neuro ICU where you can manage the patient. So all these sort of scenarios occurs in real life. And what we developed was a set of protocols that can be moved between them according to the level of resources in all these scenarios. So I'll give you an example here. We have 3 different levels of pre-hospital situations. The first one is a very basic unit without any type of resources and with a very low level of training people. Or we can be in a very advanced unit like the bottom one that have even a CT inside the ambulance. And the patient need to have some sort of recommendations to be managed in any of those scenarios. So when you are in the first unit, when you don't have a high level of training and you don't have a big level of resources, then you go over an algorithm that only move through the red boxes. You only do what the red boxes say. That's the most basic management. If you are like in an intermediate unit that have some level of resources or some level of training, then you move over the algorithm that have the red recommendations, but also you can apply the yellow recommendations that are something in the middle. And if you are in a very advanced unit like this one or a helicopter or something like that, maybe you can go over the red recommendations, the yellow recommendations, and the green recommendations that are the most advanced ones. So either in any of those situations, all of them pre-hospital care, you can move from different conditions. And sometimes if you have some elements, but run out of those elements for any circumstance, then you can downgrade your management to the red boxes again, because even if you are in that ambulance, at that moment, you behave like the first scenario. Same for emergency room. You can be in an emergency room that have very low level of resources, intermediate level of resources, or high level of resources. Like in this case, you are in a scenario that have also a CT in the resuscitation area. So same, you can move over the red recommendations for the most basic ER, yellow plus red in the intermediate level, and green plus yellow plus red in the most advanced unit. So the project also have additional supplementary material that can be integrated into the whole exercise. And then you go for the full protocol description. This is in the bottom, you see the one of the protocols. This is algorithm number 9. That is the protocol when you have access to ER, ICU, but you don't have access to surgical staff. So then depending of the level of resources, you can move only with the red recommendations that are the most basic one, or you can go over the red and in this case, the black sentences that include the intermediate one, or you can go over the red, the black, and the green sentences that are the most advanced one. So according to where you are and which resources you have, you can either have some sort of recommendations. What we are doing now is we are validating all these protocols in a real scenario with a clinical study. So this is the protocol that has been published and also some sort of reviews that we performed before about how often you have this sort of stratified protocols for trauma care in regions of the world. These are some of the areas where we are implementing now the study. In 3 different regions of Colombia. We have the Coffee Grove area, we have some Andean mountain region, and we have some Amazonian region that is the poorest region in Colombia, where you have some level of facilities that brings advanced care for a lot of TBI patients there in a very constrained resource environment. So we are now in the process of finishing the study. I think hopefully in some months, we are gonna have the final results in order to see if these also represent a benefit for the outcome of the patients. We are evaluating a 6 months outcome after we finish the whole study. So thank you so much for allowing me to share this information with you. We are now in the process of building the BOOTStrap spine protocol that will be beyond one option of treatment for spinal trauma, also in a stratified fashion, following the same pathway that we did with TBI. This has been supported in part by the NIHR Global Health Research Group on acquired brain and spine injuries that is supported by the NIHR and the University of Cambridge project with our research center. So thank you so much.
We do have time for questions.
U.S. Warren Dorlag from the University of Colorado. It seems like this really should be the standard for all guidelines that we make. But the amount of work that it would take just seems absolutely tremendous. In your development, can you share some sort of tricks on how you've been able to do this? Because you're overlapping so many variables. Tell us how you do that.
Thanks for your comment. And definitely, we consider that maybe it will be an option that apply more to the real life, supporting the daily care that many people do in different regions of the world. As you mentioned, it's not easy. It's a task that require go over a strong methodology. The good luck for us developing this process that we participate in several of the standard process, like the Brain Trauma Foundation process, some other sort of guideline development in many of those consensus that I showed to you. So we have the opportunity to really go deep into the methodological aspects of many of these efforts. So what we do was combine some of these strategies in order to go over developing this set of protocols. I think a key aspect is that really you need to have people that have the experience. In many of these exercises, sometimes there is people that can introduce some sorts of bias because they do not practice in all those different kind of environments. So what we did was select people that is really managing a high load of patients in those very difficult scenarios, and they can really show us what they are doing on daily basis. So I think the combination of integrating the people that really have the experience with all the methodological aspects going over what is already published in those different topics will be a key aspect in order to fulfill the objective.
Thank you so much, Andres. We look forward to getting to shake your hand in person next go round. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for the invitation, and congratulations for this excellent conference that you are organizing that will be really helpful for many people around the world. Thank you so much.